All right, so did you hear about the dumpster fire happening on over there at ACX and Audible headquarters? Let's talk about this ugly truth behind publishing audiobooks on Audible in today's podcast episode. Why is this a problem? Well, between Audible and Amazon, they control 90% of the market. 90% of audiobook sales. Now, this might be an arbitrary number. I have not been able to check the sources on that, but we can all agree that they're definitely sharing. They're selling their fair share of audiobooks, and here we are in a predicament. Don't know about the predicament? Well, make sure you stay tuned to today's podcast. Well, what's happening is Dale here, and I'm just tickled to death you took a little bit of time out your day to spend a little bit of time with me to talk about my favorite thing in publishing books. Normally, I go into a sponsor spot, and I'm always geeked up to share sponsors, but oddly enough, we are sponsor free this month. So I just want to give a big shout out to you, the listener, those that have been helping to support this podcast. It means the world to me. Everyone from the sponsors to the listeners, you guys are the ones and the reason why I do this business. And with that being said, I want to say a big thank you. If you subscribe to me on YouTube for the Self-Publishing with Dale podcast, big kudos, big thank you. We just hit a big milestone in 1,000 subscribers. So thank you so much. And if you're not subscribed, do yourself a huge favor. Go over to dalelinks.com/YouTube podcast and get subscribed today. All right, so let's go into things. We're going to talk about a little bit what's been going on with Audible and ACX. Here's the timeline. And I'm going to kind of give a rough timeline because it starts to kind of fall apart after a bit. I tried to track everything as best I could. Back in October of 2020, there was a bit of an issue inside the ACX dashboards. And ACX was very communicative in telling their rights holders, or the narrators and rights holders being the authors and such, there was a discrepancy. What they called a technical glitch, and I'm using quotation marks here with this, and it revealed some irregularities, meaning that, okay, normally, whenever a customer buys an audiobook, they're given the opportunity to refund it. Now, behind the scenes, what would end up happening is there was no refund column within the ACX dashboard. So they just naturally took and subtracted it away from the credits that were within the ACX account. No one would be none the more wary, unless, of course, they started out at a -1, and then they would probably just assume that, oh, well, I had an audiobook return. Well, this technical glitch that revealed some irregularities included that all of these things had bottlenecked. So in other words, these refunds for these rights holders. And so everyone got their accounts slammed, like some into the negatives. It was absolutely crazy. Why is this a problem? Let's go ahead and address this first of all from the listener's side of things, the Audible customer, and of course the rights holder, such as someone like you that listens to this podcast. So here's how refunds worked previously. For customers, they can return their audiobook for any reason whatsoever within the first year, and they get a full refund. Now, there's no apparent limitations to this, though Audible insisted some limitations on returns, meaning that if someone proved to be problematic, like they're always returning audiobooks, then they're kind of pushing back and they're going, no, you can't do that. So what I would like to point out, though, is there was a quote, and this is within a great group called Fair Deal for Rights Holders and Narrators. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. It's on Facebook. And here's a screenshot they had shared. And inside that screenshot, this person on a Reddit thread, like braggadociously, like boasted all of the audiobooks that they pretty much have been getting away with getting pretty much for free, almost like a library-based system. This person said, I've had Audible 3 months and I've returned a book almost every day. email overnight, and when you wake up, 1 credit will be back. So this kind of shows that there are some bad actors that are really working this system. So, and who pays for this? Well, it's clear ACX doesn't, because they're doing returns. So they're taking that from you. So you lose out that credit they originally do. Well, you're probably saying, oh, well, I don't understand, Dale, how's this a problem? I'm more on that later here. Let's look at it from the side of authors, someone who's the rights holder. As a rights holder on ACX, you get a 40% royalty, and that is for exclusive distribution through ACX. Now, if you're non-exclusive distribution through ACX, that's 25%, okay, a little lower. So it's already pretty low as it is, and it's clear ACX is pretty much taking the lion's share of the profits. And here's the kicker. Back a bit of time ago, okay, back in October, when this whole thing rolled out, the exclusivity agreement meant you had to stay at least 7 years with that specific audiobook on ACX. That's it. Couldn't go on to any other publishing platform, which I've shared numerous publishing platforms for audiobooks. So you can always just look at past podcasts to learn a little bit more. And you couldn't opt out of that 7-year agreement until you were at least 1 year on the marketplace. And it's actually a fairly easy process to get yourself off, because, I mean, just literally go to support@acx.com. They remove your title from distribution, exclusive distribution, and then you go non-exclusive. The other thing is too, you've got this 40% structure and you get the 25% structure, but then there lies this ambiguous pricing structure in which, first of all, ACX determines how much your audiobook is based on the length, which is mind-boggling. How you would price a 100,000 word manuscript the same as, let's say, for instance, something different like a quotes book that has 100,000 words into it. I think that it's never made sense, but this is not the hill I'm going to die on here today, folks. I'm just kind of saying that it's been an ambiguous payout structure, because you've got member credits, you've got non-member credits, and then you're paid pretty much flat out if somebody buys something on Amazon or through Apple, which is distributed through ACX. So knowing that, how much they're going to charge, and then these different types of credits really kind of make it dicey for us. So it's already tough as it is. So what happened? This mass bulk of refunds ended up getting pulled out of a ton of people's accounts. It was just it caught up. And this wasn't just for a month's worth of stuff. This, I guess, was weeks upon weeks, must have just piled up. So at any rate, this put some rights holders deeply into the negative, meaning they owed ACX money for distributing their audiobooks, which that sucks. That sucks on so many other different levels. So, before all the noise was happening here in October, when people realized that they were just getting hamstrung, there's some people that are just screwing them over. Before, they just were quietly removing the refunds. After, it was blatant removal. So one author had over 100 returns charged to their account, making them owe money to Audible. Now, I'm not sure if they had to pay the money. Either way, they were in a deficit, so they're not getting a paycheck for that month in October. It was business as usual, though, for ACX. Zero transparency. You try to get a hold of somebody over at support. How much are these member credits? How much is my book going to be if it's X amount of minutes long? Don't know. They don't seem to know either. Not sure why. It seems like that should be your business. Authors saw sales anytime that it would come through, but they had no way of knowing where the refunds were coming because they were taking from an established credit. There was no specific column for refunds. I'm going to get to that in a little bit here. There's so much we're covering here. So here's how it cuts deeper. This is where you need to pay closest attention. Audible ain't your friend. They don't really honestly care about you. Why? Because they encourage returns after initial purchases. Try it out. Go over, buy an audiobook on Audible. All right? And then see, what's your first email that you get back? The first email you're going to get back typically is, hey, just in case you want a refund, try this audiobook instead. So what they're doing is they're deliberately delivering traffic over to other audiobooks. That's like me showing up on over to McDonald's. I order my food, I'm getting ready to eat it, and they're like, oh, hey, by the way, if you don't like that, why don't you go ahead and return it? And we'll do it 100% free. Don't sweat it. And so, of course, I'm going to probably eat a little bit of the McDonald's, hand it back, make this an all-you-can-eat buffet. And that's what's happening. So, they're leaning heavily into this whole exchanging thing, despite never disclosing to the customers who foots this bill. It's not ACX, I can assure you. It's the author. And I'm sure if more readers or listeners knew what they were doing, not taking from ACX per se, but taking directly from an author's table, like literally taking food off their table. If they knew that, they probably wouldn't be doing that so much. The problem is they're encouraging this type of a community. They're creating this vibe for their tribe to where it's like, it's okay. If you don't like it, return it, and you just bought it. What? So, fast forward, November 2020. U.S. Authors Guild and about 15,000 authors and various organizations put together a public letter to address some of the issues. There was also a Facebook pressure group called Fair Deal for Rights Holders and Narrators by Australian author Susan May. Highly recommend you go take a look at the group. It's very supportive. It's really cool. It's not a lot of people just spending time punching down. What we're trying to do is figure out some better alternatives to where we can coexist with ACX and, get treated fairly. But go over to dalelinks.com/fair deal. I'm going to try to leave a link inside the show notes here today for that specific link for the group. Any rate, the Alliance of Independent Authors in November as well, they ended up downgrading Amazon ACX's rating on their watchdog system from essentially just the standard, like it's approved, to caution. So this is crazy that Ally, very reputable nonprofit organization, said, you might want to be careful about publishing over on ACX. And so this is exactly what they said. The Alliance of Independent Authors has today downgraded Amazon ACX's rating as a self-publishing service from approved via pending during investigation to caution. The change arises from concerns about income loss from Amazon's Audible refund and exchange policies and deteriorating customer service to authors and narrators. Now, notice there's no issue, no problems with customer service when it comes to the actual listeners, but to the people that provide the content for them, it seems like they're lacking some of that etiquette that they should otherwise need. But the good news is this, it's not all doom and gloom. There is some progress because believe it or not, actually, I recorded this video already for my main channel. When I went on vacation, the big news rolled out, and I'm going to share that very last one here for last. Okay, so first of all, there are limitations on returns for individual account holders. So we're discovering a pattern that, there's some people that are saying where they were used to able to make returns and refunds with no issue. It's almost like they're like, yeah, you've met your quota. It was not saying that specifically, but either way, they're kind of letting them know like when you've pretty much extended your stay when it comes to getting that return. So that's kind of nice. The next thing is, though they're still going to offer a 365-day refund for the customer, there's only going to be that 7-day window. Now, that's all well and good, but most bad actors are probably going to be able to consume the audiobook within the 7 days, so you're still eating a return. I think that some of the people that are probably going close to a year at a time may have never even listened to it, or maybe they realize they can get a return for it. Either way, it's closed it down. I'm not the biggest fan, but I certainly like that they've walked it back from the 365 days and they're willing to eat the cost. I would love to see something that's a little bit more based on like true refunds, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second here. But let's keep pushing forward here, because there is also the exclusivity clause. When you're doing exclusive for 40% on ACX, you have to be on for 7 years, or for at least a year before you can break that agreement with no issues. They actually walk that back to 7 years down to 90 days. So if you end up going exclusive with ACX and you decide, you know what, I want to move out, I want to go do non-exclusive distribution through ACX, try out Find Away Voices, Audiobooks Unleashed, and so on and so forth, then that's probably going to be the path for you. If you're 50-50 though, folks, sorry, you're stuck. It sucks unless you end up buying out the audiobook rights from the narrator. 50-50 means you're there for the full 7 years. So that won't help you at all. So exclusive to non-exclusive to in 90 days though, that's not a bad thing. So I really kind of like that. And the thing that just rolled out last week was the fact they finally put a returns column. So a column that is completely separate. Now, they're only going to be accounting for returns done as of January 2021. They're not looking at doing retroactive refunds or paying you back for any of that stuff that was done last year. So essentially anything that's returned, you will be able to see it inside your dashboard into a separate column, which was a huge deal to me. I thought it's better that we know what they're taking from, so we can kind of address any kind of concerns that might be happening there. So what about returns? What about the fact that there's going to be someone out there that listens to your audiobook within 1 day, returns it, and tries to check those things out? It's going to be a lot of trust. But one thing I would recommend to the ACX team would be something like true returns. So if a person, say, has consumed less than 25% of the content, just throwing out an arbitrary number here, quarter your content, they decide they don't like it, they want to return. I totally think that's totally fine. But if somebody listens to the entire book, they've consumed that whole thing. It's like sitting down to have a meal again at McDonald's. I'm going to just go ahead and chew this on up. Oh, hey, could you give me a refund? It was all right, but I mean, yeah, meh. You know what I mean? Meh. Can you give me more food? Oh, you're going to give me more food. Fantastic. All right. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm at least happy that they are disclosing the refunds now. So if we can kind of see some little bit of like middle ground, it would be awful nice. All right. So the next thing I'm going to address here before we start to wrap things up is there's been some really weird account terminations or freezings due to bounty link misuse. Now you're probably saying, Dale, you told me bounty links are great. You get $75 per person that you refer through that. Yeah, normally they're pretty good. But there's been a number of rights holders that have reached out to me privately to discuss how their accounts have been closed or frozen due to reported issues of misuse of bounty links, and I'm putting quotations on that. And it's also labeled as fraudulent activity or suspicious free trial activity, all with quotations here, because what's happening is you're sharing the bounty link. A person, let's say, watches your video on YouTube, and they say, oh, I definitely would love to go ahead and get a free copy of his book with a 30-day trial. Fantastic. I'll go ahead and get it. Well, I can't keep them on. What am I going to do? Plea with them to go ahead and just make sure that you use this link only if you get an Audible membership past the free 30 days. So people are getting dinged with this, and these are legitimately good people. You know, nobody that's working like black hat tactics or anything that's gray. They're just sharing their link. The people that are misusing it, we have no control of, because guess what? It's online. So it's accessible to just about anybody and everybody. We can't keep the bad actors out, and you shouldn't be penalizing those that are trying to use the bounty link system. 0 cents here, folks. Let's just say you're like, I've had enough, Dale. This is why I feel that Findaway Voices is the best alternative. No, this is not a sponsored podcast by Findaway. They've sponsored before, but not this time around. Back in February, Findaway Voices actually offered any previously exclusive audiobooks that would switch to non-exclusive on ACX. They would give them a 10% royalty bonus going over into March sales. And I hear they actually have extended it just a bit more. It might have finished more recently, but it just kind of goes to show you that Findaway Voices has the author and the narrator's best interests at heart, so it might be somewhere for you to consider. I want to give a big shout out and special thanks to you again. Of course, I told you just this earlier in this podcast that I hit 1,000 subscribers over on YouTube, so thank you and big kudos to each and every single one of you. You can also subscribe at dalelinks.com/YouTube podcast. Final words on this whole interesting dumpster fire of ACX and Audible. Hang in there. If you want to see change, you're going to need to have to create that change. So go join the group over on Facebook that I mentioned. Fair deal for narrators and rights holders. And become part of that. You can even go to websites like Ally, the Alliance of Independent Authors, and they are posting some posts up there. Subscribe to their blog, well worth it. Highly recommend their membership too if you get the opportunity. But if you're kind of like, Dale, this is much ado about nothing. If you're like, you know what, I'm happy with the status quo, let's not worry about it, then you can disregard what I say. But I would just encourage you that if you really, really want better for yourself and for those that are within the indie author community, then you got to stand up for your rights. And I'm hoping that this audio podcast or video, if you're watching on YouTube, will help serve as some type of motivation and inspiration for you to get active and be active and ask for change. Because otherwise, when you're getting table scraps for an audiobook that you put thousands into, at least you did something, right? Well, folks, we're going to start to wrap up today's podcast, but thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out your day again for listening. Subscribe or follow me on your preferred podcasting platform and leave a review, or if you're watching on YouTube, you leave a comment for me. In the meantime, this has been Self-Publishing with Dale, and I will chat with you next week.